the agenda?
Yes, we have several changes to the agenda today. We have an added consent item, which is the inventory and research working group meeting notes of May 30th. And an added discussion item regarding Parkside Secondary School. And an added general information item, the City of Hamilton inventory places of education presented by the inventory and research working group.
May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Wolf, seconded by all in favor? Carried. Under declarations of interest, are there any declarations today? Seeing none, we'll move on to our next item. We have the approval of our previous minutes for May 19th. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of May 19th, 2016? Tim, seconded by Mark. All in favor? Under consent items, we have items 5.1a, b, c, d, and e, all heritage permit application delegated approvals. May I have, if there's no discussion, may I have a motion to receive the delegated approvals? Well, second. Oh,
sorry, can I bring up a point?
Sure.
If that's okay, and that's regarding item 5.1e. It's about a tree and it's retroactive. It mentions it's retroactive. I guess the question is to city staff here. It sounds like the tree has already been removed, right? So if it's part of the character of the property, shouldn't the city council or even the planning department take it a step further than the recommendations and say they should plant a tree there, as opposed to, you know, they have the option to plant a tree until 15 or thereabouts, right? So if you're going to maintain the character of that property, and it is retroactive now, so there's nothing you can do about the tree, obviously, right? So shouldn't we be more forceful about that and ask that a tree actually be planted to replace it, rather than leaving them the option?
Through the chair, I mean, typically we would, the placement of the tree is a little awkward because it's on a small strip of land, kind of in the parking lot, so it's surrounded by asphalt, which is not really a great place for a tree to be and to grow. So we haven't necessarily required it in this case because the growing conditions for a tree in that location are not ideal. So that was the reasoning in this case.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, so Lee as well, seconded by Chuck. Yes. All in favor? Okay. Item 5.2 is one of our added items. So this is an inventory and research working group meeting notes for May 30th. So there are recommendations in the working group notes. So that's in your yellow packages. So the recommendation is as follows: that the Hamilton Heritage Committee add 933 Highway 8 Stony Creek to the City of Hamilton Register of Property of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest. And there's an assessment that's attached. May I have a motion to approve the recommendations of the working group? Tim, seconded by Chuck. All in favor? Do you need to receive the... Under our discussion items, we have several reports with recommendations before us that Chelsea's here to speak to. We will go through them individually. So item 8.1 is our heritage permit application for the erection of an accessory structure at 52 Markland Street in Hamilton. Chelsea, would you like to?
Through the chair, the property owners have submitted a heritage permit application to put a new detached garage in the back of their property. So it is located in the Markland Heritage Conservation District. The proposed garage, we presented a number of designs which were both acceptable to the Heritage Permit Subcommittee as well as to staff. They proposed a simple design that had a roof that's the same pitch as the existing house, so the property may maintain a consistency. One option was to have a dormer in the center, another option being not. They've also presented a number of cladding materials, which also both those cladding materials were acceptable to the Heritage Committee and staff. So proposing either a wood batten type of cladding or a horizontal clapboard type of cladding. So overall, both staff and the Heritage Permit Subcommittee felt that the garage was in keeping with the character of the Heritage District. not mimicking the heritage building on site, but distinct and obviously modern, but yet respectful as well of the streetscape in that strip.
Is there any discussion? Any questions?
Can I ask a question again? It's through the chair to staff again, to Chelsea. I mean, I understand, well, I've actually had two questions. So the first one is, and I'm perhaps straying a bit beyond the mandated heritage here, but it's 21 feet tall, I think, and it looks like there's apartments right in behind it, right? Very close to the property line too, right? So obviously people will be impacted, right? The neighbors, very close neighbors. Was there any thought, and you just mentioned it too, instead of having such a tall pitched roof, to have it a little less of an impact to the neighbors, right? And a proposal, I don't know if the subcommittee reviewed that as well as a potential option, but it looks like, and that's the second part of the question, it looks like there's a variance that they've gone right up against the property too. And again, that'll, if you look at the picture on, what is it here? It's part of the submission. I mean, you can see how close those apartments are, right? On page, it's page 2 of 3 in Appendix B of this. And, if I understand we're trying to match, but at the same time, we don't have to match because it's not really a heritage edition. I would think that there would be more, given where it's located, so close to the property line, that it's, and there's a variance to get to that point, I think, and that there's apartments right behind it, and literally impact the sun, I think, if I have the right orientation here. Is there any consideration to have an alternative design proposal so that it's less impact? Again, it's not really heritage, right, per se, but I thought that might be part of the consideration here, that it's a less of a obtrusive design. Maybe you don't have to have such a high-pitched roof on the new structure to match the house, and you impact the neighbors less. So I know it's a bit of a speech, but.
Through the chair, I can walk you through a little bit of kind of the considerations that the Heritage Committee considered. So they don't need a variance in terms of their setback to the rear and the side yard. They're really within the zoning bylaw with that respect. They will require a minor variance application to handle the height, because the maximum permitted height for an accessory building, I believe, is about 13 feet. So they will need a variance for that. The consideration, I think, in pushing it back further to the back was to minimize the impact on more of the heritage streetscape, per se. And in terms of the impact on the apartments behind, I think that the apartments behind are set back far enough that it would be a fairly minimal impact, because it looks like there's at least a backyard that belongs to that apartment building. So I don't necessarily there are going to be any sun or shadow impacts on those apartment units.
Can I ask a follow-up? Was part of the consideration to ask the neighbors? Is it even part of or consider the neighbors as part of the submission?
Through the chair, that's part of the consideration, absolutely. The Heritage Committee is also considering the guidelines for accessory buildings in that district, because Martin Duran has its own specific guidelines that we're trying to incorporate. And the apartments themselves are not necessarily included in the Heritage Conservation District.
Through the chair, perhaps I can add, so as part of the heritage permit, there is no neighborhood circulation or any type of requirement for circulation, but there is under the community adjustment. So the Planning Act requires a stipulation of 60 meters. So the neighbors would be advised of the application for minor variance.
Okay. And they'd have a form to present their concerns at that point.
Through the chair, that's correct. They can either provide written notice or written concerns, or they can come into the committee of adjustment on the day of the hearing and provide their verbal concerns or comments.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, at heritage permit review, was there any discussion about the building or any concern?
We took that into consideration, and the review committee concerns itself with heritage aspects. There are other avenues that need to come to our jurisdiction, community adjustments, etc. All of those concerns are addressed. We did discuss heights, etc. The local committee had no problems with it, so on the heritage considerations, which are absolutely no problem. So the permit is
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Comments? So what we have before us is the recommendation that the heritage permit application HP 2016-017 be approved for the erection of an accessory structure on the designated property of 52 Markham Street in Hamilton, as shown in the PXA to report PED 16164, subject to the submission and approval of the minor variance application and the following heritage permit conditions, and we have a list of conditions there. May we have a motion to approve the recommendation? Will, seconded by Dave. All in favor? Carried. Is there any opposed? None? Our next item is item 8.2, is the recommendation to designate 493 Dundas Street East in Hamilton under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act and to repeal the existing designation by law 86-121. Chelsea, would you like to comment?
Through the chair, there was a mistake in terms of the title in that agenda. It should really read recommendation to amend bylaw 81121, which is a bylaw to designate 493 Dundas Street in Glenville. So we may probably all know it as the Pearson House in Waterdown. So as a way of some background, so the property as well as the adjacent property was subdivided. And when it went through the subdivision application, staff required a cultural heritage impact assessment to assess the impact that was going to have on this designated heritage property. And so at that point, the cultural heritage impact assessment identified some additional heritage attributes that weren't covered in the designation bylaw from 1981. So the recommendation at the time from this committee and from staff is that we should determine an avenue to incorporate those additional heritage attributes, either be it through a heritage conservation easement agreement or issuing a new designation bylaw. And so we looked at the options and we recognized that, one, we would have to amend the legal description for 493 Dundas Street because it was made smaller and some of those lines were incorporated into the subdivision. And two, it wouldn't necessarily make sense to have both the old designation bylaw and the heritage conservation easement with new wording. And this was our opportunity to update the wording and make sure that we're consistent with the Heritage Act currently and have a clear list of heritage attributes so that it's clear for both staff and clear for members of the public and the property owner to understand what they might need a heritage permit for. So that's why we have this recommendation in front of you. So the intent would be to amend the existing designation bylaw with this new statement of cultural heritage value and heritage attributes. So it does include all the heritage attributes that were included in the original designation bylaw, as well as some specific attributes that speak to the landscape features, as well as views to and from the house.
Is there any discussion?
Are the amendments very expansive, or can you give us more detail as to what specific amendments are made? Or the other question is, since the first owners, Mary Holmes, came to this committee and we agreed to certain things, it's been sold twice, I think. And concern at that time was, as it changes hands, will this amendment to the bylaw make sure that, I think you said that the restrictions are then carried forward, that there's nothing to fall through the cracks, because it seems to be, it's a real jewel on Dundas Street, and with the development that's going to go around it, it's going to be the only thing that's going to be decent to look at when it's all said and done. So, can you sort of elaborate on some of the specifics of the adjustment?
So through the chair, so some of the specific heritage attributes, additional heritage attributes that were identified, if you look on page 4 of the report attached as 8.2, specifically the attributes are the setting of the residence overlooking Dundas Street East in a landscape setting of mature trees, and landscape features that reflect the former farm uses, which include the path of the driveway to the west of the house, the raised grass area in the front yard, the tree canopy that lines Dundas Street East and the west side of the driveway and surrounds the house, and then also key views. So from the street at the base of the driveway looking towards the house, from the northwest corner of the property looking towards the house, from the front rooms and the ground and second floors of the house looking outwards to Dundas Street, and then the views of the property heading north along the driveway, with the house to the east and the landscape lands to the west. So, and just to provide some further clarification, in the heritage impact assessment, there's a map showing what we're looking at in terms of these views. Let me find a page for you. Does anybody find it before I do? Page 14 of Appendix F of that report demonstrates what we're looking at in terms of view. So the intent is that we're identifying that those views are significant, so any alteration of those views should go through a heritage plan application. It's not to say that those views couldn't be altered with some minor things in the future, but we do want the ability to regulate it so that we make sure that we're protecting anything that's significant within these views, which is in this case really the open space and the views upon the house.
Just, nobody can see this, but I just go behind it on the way down here, that's sort of the vista that it is. It's all green, and when we build around it, that's going to be the only green area that's in that whole stretch of the street. So I'm very satisfied with what you just indicated. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Any discussion?
Quick question, Madam Teacher. I'm wondering, to do with this kind of massive sprawl building going through areas like Waterdown and Flamborough, if there's sort of specific strategy that staff looks at in these kind of former rural townships that are getting absorbed. We saw like the Shaver House bulldozed with really a thought. So, I mean, this seems almost identical to preserving these small towns. I'm just curious if there's a...
Through the chair, I mean, I wouldn't say there's a strategy specifically for kind of the rural areas. I think, the difference between this one and that Shaver property is that we had jumpstart on this because it was already designated, right? So we're negotiating from a place of more control, I would say, with the designation file already existing. But I mean, certainly for any property that, or any development application that includes a property that we think is of heritage value, it's, we try to identify that early on during the formal consultation stage and make a recommendation in terms of requiring a cultural heritage impact so we can take a closer look at that cultural heritage value. I mean, the challenge with the Shaver property that we're talking about was that the cultural heritage impact assessment was pushed off to the site plan stage, which then makes it difficult to require its retention when it's already gone through an OPA and a rezoning and it was never done up.
Any other questions? If not, we have a recommendation before us. May I have a motion to approve the recommendation as well? Seconded by Kathy. All in favor? Carried. Our next item is item 8.3, which is the recommendations to designate 21 Stone Church Road West in Hamilton under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. You all set?
Through the chair. It's like Chelsea out. You have a recommendation in front of you to designate 21 Stone Church Road, known as the Barton Stone Church, in front of you, and you may be thinking to yourselves, well, isn't that already designated? Well, in terms of just providing a little bit of background, so there were two notices of intention to designate, one for the church and one for the cemetery that were passed in 1993. There was apparently at some time, at least from what we can determine based on what's in the file, there was some discrepancy with the legal description at the time. And fast forward to, I think, 2014, the church board applied to take advantage of one of our grant programs that's specifically for designated properties. And so when we looked at it, we said, well, the designation bylaw was never passed. It was only the notices of intention to designate. Which meant that they wouldn't be eligible for our grant programs. So obviously we want them to be eligible for our grant programs. But given that the notice of intention to designate were passed in 1993, they were passed under the legislation at the time, which has since been updated. Now we have our statement of cultural heritage value or interest and our list of attributes which clearly identify those physical, tangible attributes that we want to protect. But it wasn't that case when it was originally written. So what we suggested to the church board at the time was that we could either pass the notice, the designation bylaw with the existing notices, or we could take the time to amend those notices to provide clarity for staff, them, future, so that we're consistent with the Heritage Act today. So they like that option. So here we are moving forward with a revised statement of cultural heritage value and list of attributes. So the intent would be to withdraw the current notice of intention to designate and pass, in this case, just one, because we can do both the cemetery and church under one designation bylaw. I think that makes sense in this case. I'm not sure why it was two at the time, but and that's what you're looking for.
Is there any questions or comments?
Through the chair, are there many other properties that have the same conditions to the city that you can think of that have been previously addressed like that and may have to be updated?
Through the chair, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I think there's one additional property where the notice of intention to designate was passed, but not the designation bylaw. And I think that was due to opposition from the property owners at the time, and I suppose we never really pushed it. The thing about having a notice of intention to designate, though, is that we still have the ability to require heritage permits, and so we have an ability to manage change to their properties, even though the designation bylaw is not fully placed. It's not an ideal situation to be in, but we do have an opportunity to manage change through that influence.
Just to follow up, would there be an action on city staff to do that sort of analysis to the inventory in the city to see if there are other ones, to be a bit proactive on it? If there's unlimited time and resources.
If you could just add that to your work plan.
Not many lists.
2013.
Through the chair, I'm not sure, I'm not aware of any others that have it. I think we have designation bylaws for the other ones, so, I mean, I'm sure that's something that would probably come about as we're moving through the city and doing our inventory work as well, if there's anything else we missed, but I don't think so.
The only other one might be the book cemetery is still not completed.
Yes. I will have an update on that.
That's all. As far as Barton Stone, in 2014, at the time that this came up, I actually had the opportunity to go and make a presentation to the congregation. because they had to make a final vote as to how they wanted to proceed. And they are fantastic stewards of their building and of the property around it, and they're very excited to get this process going. So it's certainly something that the property owners are very eager to. So we have before us the recommendations of 8.3. If there was no other questions or discussion, may I have a motion to approve the recommendation? David, seconded by Mark. All in favor? Carried. Any opposed? None. Item 8.4 is a recommendation to designate 140 Locke Street South in Hamilton under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act.
Madam Chair, if I may. I'm not sure if I'm the only one who received this request by email, but the property owner emailed me and asked if we could vote on this next Heritage meeting so as to give him a chance to come and say his piece. His email said that he could not be here today. So here's what I'm going to say. I know that correct me if I'm wrong, we normally give the property owner a chance to come and talk. He couldn't be here today. So for that reason of kind of normative procedure, I say it's a legitimate request, and we could do this in September. If there's a strong feeling we ought to do this today, I respect that strong feeling, but unless that strong feeling is expressed, I am comfortable moving a motion to table this till our September meeting. So I so move, and if someone could second it, we can talk about it.
Second. Do you want to provide any?
Sure.
It's not a time sensitive.
It's not a time-sensitive matter, so I don't have any concerns with deferring it. And yes, I did get that email from the property owner. Unfortunately, he's on vacation, so wasn't able to. But he would like to attend and speak to it.
I have a question. Through the chair. So at what stage in this process would or should it have been notified?
Through the chair. So as part of our designation process, the property owner gets notified throughout the process. So one, when we first get a request to designate, if it doesn't come from the property owner themselves, then we do send out a notice that we've received this request. And keep them informed during the preliminary assessment stage. And then in this case, for this particular case, it changed ownership. So originally, it was the original property owners that made the request, and then it changed hands. So they would have gotten notice when we start and retain consultants to do a culture heritage assessment. Then we tell the property owners that we've engaged a consultant, and we'll be bringing forward a recommendation. We'll let them know when that recommendation is coming forward. So we received notice of that, and then in addition, when this recommendation is coming forward to the Heritage Committee, we received notice of that.
And he's still on vacation. The question was really just to make sure that, the communication had gone out there, but I'm fine with moving it to the next.
So the motion would be to defer to the August or September meeting?
Oh, did he request? I thought it was, in my head it was September, but it was August. Do you want it?
Through the chair, I don't recall.
Okay, Madam Chair.
Just we should probably set a timeline so that it doesn't push too far.
We are meeting in August though. Is it August meeting?
Yeah, through the chair, I didn't indicate a specific month.
So I had said September. Let's say August, and then if you can't attend the August meeting, we'll do it again. But I want to vote on the reason I'm changing. Do I need to amend my motion really, or can I just clarify it's to the August? I meant to the next meeting.
Oh yeah, the next meeting.
Yeah. So to the next meeting, and my hope is that we can vote on it then. So one reason why I'm changing it to August meeting, or clarifying that it's the August meeting, not September meeting, is I want to deal with this. So hopefully we won't have to table it yet to August.
So, motion by Councillor, seconded by Wolf. All in favor? Carried.
Thank
Any opposed? Okay. Item 8.5 is one of our added items. So it is actually a separate white package. So this is in regards to Parkside Secondary School at 31 Parkside Avenue in Dundas. Chelsea, did you want to give some background? Or I guess maybe I can give just an initial comment. The reason this is coming forward, this has been an item that has been on the list of properties that the inventory research working group has sort of highlighted as maybe a concern that needs to be looked at. In the process of their last meeting, it's come to the attention that demolition permit has actually been applied for on this property. So it is a bit of a time-sensitive matter. The information that we've received is that if there's no issues with the permit application, they could receive applications to demolish as of August 23rd, I believe was the date. So Chelsea provided this package of information. Maybe if you could give some background, Chelsea, just as to.
So, through the chair, to provide a bit of background. So, in my understanding is in February, General Election Committee staff to purchase the Parkside School property with the intent of demolishing it. So that was February of this year. Previously, the school board had gone through a surplus property process, at which point city staff get circulated any surplus notices. So at that time, there was a surplus notice in 2014 for this specific property, at which point staff identified that the property is not designated, it's not on the register, it's not on our inventory, but we believe it to be of cultural heritage value. It has association with a local architect known as Kyles and Kyles. And it's a good mid-century example of mid-century style of architecture. And then in 2005, the school board also did a circulation with a number of schools that they were looking to surplus. At which point, staff went and did a preliminary assessment for all the schools that they were identifying for surplus, which Parkside was one of them. And so we again flagged the potential cultural heritage value at that point as well. So, however, it doesn't appear that staff working on the acquisition of the property or the demolition were made aware of that potential cultural heritage value. And it doesn't appear that there was any discussion of cultural heritage value to the report that went to General Election Committee in February of this year. So that's where we find ourselves here now. There's some additional information that I've provided from Anne Gillespie, a member of the Inventory and Research Committee. She's done a preliminary assessment, and she's included some photographs that she's obtained herself, as well as through some research that she's done. So in terms of the cultural heritage value that it displays, it's, as I mentioned, associated with the local architect Kyles and Kyles. It certainly has long-standing history as a high school in Dundas. Specifically, the Kyles and Kyles firm is actually involved in a number of other school projects across Hamilton, such as Dundas Parkside School, Island School, Ryerson Public School, Holy Name, and several other Hamilton schools. So certainly there's some value there. In addition, the building that's built of reinforced concrete actually was a recipient of an award in 1959, shortly after it was designed for its innovative design. So that's in terms of that's a little bit of its history.
So I think from a city perspective, the property was purchased with the intent that the building would be demolished and it would be used as cemetery lands.
Exactly. So that's correct to the chair. So there is a demolition currently pending right now that's been submitted, and so currently, according to the building code, staff will 10 business days to look at this building for application. So potentially they could be issuing it, I think, believe the date was August 26th, but certainly they could issue it before that as well if they have a chance to review it.
So, knowing the information that we have in front of us, the committee can make a recommendation as to how we move forward on it. We could do nothing. We could, because the building, or the demolition permit's gone in, we can't add it to the register, it's not retroactive. It is a council-directed project, so calling for emergency designation is not an option, but we need to advise council on maybe some considerations and heritage.
Through the chair, I was just going to say, you could add it to the register. It wouldn't necessarily prevent demolition, but it may be an opportunity to demonstrate, just inform council that it does have cultural heritage value. Maybe we should take another look at this. I mean, the demolition was a council directive, but this committee certainly could inform council of cultural heritage value and recommend something like a cultural heritage impact assessment be done prior to demolition. It's just a consideration that the committee might think about.
Just a question of clarification. On the picture, the property in question, is it the school building then going back into that other park area which looks like a baseball diamond? And is the property to the right of that looks like a park? Is that city property?
Yeah. No, through the chair, no, I don't think that park space in the back belongs to the school board. I'm not as familiar with that as I would like to be.
It is a donation.
Okay, so it's, okay. Kathy just confirmed that's a digest driving park, which I know is the separate property.
And that's the property behind the school?
In behind the school, yeah.
That's owned by the city.
So I guess the developers intend to demolish the school and then square that off, and not square that with the park, but
Through the chair, the city has purchased it and intends to demolish it in order to expand the nearby cemetery.
oh, okay,
That's
so
the intent.
misunderstood. So it's a city project, the city wants to knock it down.
Excuse me. Has there been any alternative suggestions of what to do with that property?
Through the chair, I don't believe that there has been any consideration for the heritage value, at least any consideration made aware to council when they were making that decision. Or the report that went to GIC, I don't believe had any information about the heritage value that would kind of trigger that question about whether or not there are any potential uses and any ability to obtain it.
I don't know how we do this, but since the city initiative has all the heritage attributes of what we've shown, I strongly recommend this committee at least recommend to council, take another look at it to see if there's some value in it. So just, we have all sorts of problems with demolition requests from developers who will not through them. But we do it ourselves. I think we're moving along the direction. So somehow we need to make a strong statement on behalf of this committee, the council, to sort of back up a little bit. Take it over.
Could I suggest that we take up Chelsea's suggestion, although maybe I should be labelling her with it because she's totally disinterested as a Hamilton City staff member, that this committee request a cultural heritage impact assessment prior to the demolition, and that we attach high priority to this consideration. And I so move.
Kathy, did you have a question?
So I'm from Dundas, so I know her. I think the big concern over the years has been that, developers would obviously pretty choice property there, would get their hands on it and what have you. And then I think earlier this year it came to light that the councillor had
been discussing having the cemetery, just so everyone knows, there is a cemetery currently over here. So this, when they're saying they're going to make a new one over where the school is, it won't be, you know, connected. So there's quite a large, you know, municipal cemetery there. So, but, and that's all good. I think what I support Kathleen in saying, and well, that we need to definitely let council and the city know that this is of, you know, cultural significance. Particularly the architects involved, local, very well-known firm. And I guess, aside from that, my worry is that, you know, if with all the best laid plans, is that it doesn't end up as, you know, what ends up happening to this, does it get overdeveloped? Does it not end up with the city eventually anyway, and they change their mind? So I think we should make the recommendation that we at least do the cultural heritage impact assessment. I understand the building code, and that I know that we don't really have a lot of, they don't issue the demolition permit, they can do that. But I think the city will take lead of what our recommendation.
Mark?
I was just going to second the motion. I believe it's already been seconded by Kathy, so.
Do you need to clarify? If I can read out what I drafted. The committee recommends that a cultural heritage impact assessment be prepared on the property known as Lakeside Secondary School in light of information from staff regarding cultural heritage attributes.
Would the committee want to request that it be added to the register? As just
Okay. We probably add to the register. I can find you the right.
Now, where would this be, this package be appended to it?
Yeah, we can do that one as well, cultural heritage. Yeah, the heritage impact assessment, and take that to the register. Is that right?
Chelsea, would it be prudent to request that some review be done that maybe portions of the significant portions of the property be reused as part of any future development plan? Because I think the intent is that they can't reuse the building. Something that came up at inventory research was that maybe it's just that front portion can be reused as part of the cemetery plan. Do we need to have a statement that says use of the building or design components?
Through the chair, you may consider suggesting that a cultural impact assessment be completed and that those elements of the building that are identified to have cultural heritage value, that the city be directed to look at alternatives to demolition to preserve them and adaptively reuse them. That way it keeps it general in terms of allowing the cultural impact assessment to identify what's of value first and then going from there.
I believe I have all the Chelsea. One thing I had Will and I had Kathleen and Will as first and seconders.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
So is everyone comfortable with that motion, recommendation?
Can I just ask one more clarification for staff through the chair? So I'm just, I guess I just want to understand the implications of this in a little more detail. Because I think there's short-term implications, right? Like maybe staff gets diverted. I understand it's city council's decision to make, to do this very, emergency type of analysis. It's good that it's the city involved. It's not a developer breathing down their neck at this point, right? So that's a good thing. That's the short-term implications. I think, maybe I'm wrong about that, maybe there's more. That's part of my question. But the longer-term implications are, there's many schools that are like this in the city, right? And I've been to Parkside many times too, even though I grew up on the mountain. I'd say half of the high schools on the mountain look exactly the same, right? Like Sherwood and to an extent Barton and many others, which are also kind of facing the same sort of kind of, I guess, visited or being revisited, determine what to do with them. So the longer term implications to me almost seem now that we're saying, I think we're saying as a committee that every school, not every, but many schools should be subject to the same sort of cultural and heritage analysis before they're, before they're deemed surplus and moved to another. I worry that as a committee that we're going to face a situation where we're going to have, a developer involved instead, right? Who is, and we're going to get it at the last minute. And this one isn't so bad because, it's a cemetery and it's less of a time constraint, but a developer might have a significant time constraint, right, on this. So I wonder if we're setting, kind of the long term is I wonder if we're setting a precedent here, right? And it's one I'm not sure about, right? Because there's so many other schools that are similar to this. And I wouldn't even say high school too. There's, when I read the background here, maybe I'll take the opposite side. When I read things like it's the preliminary analysis of the utilitarian, and other than the foyer and the first story, there's not much that on a preliminary analysis that's there. Again, I think of a lot of schools that are very similar to this, right? So again, I think you're making a lot of speeches today, but I guess my questions are there any other short-term implications associated with supporting this? And the longer term, as a committee, are we setting a precedent here, right? For every school property that's similar to this, right?
Well, I think as a committee, really what we're supposed to be doing is one, advising council on heritage buildings. One of my concerns here is that they maybe haven't received that information. It would seem like they haven't. So to make sure that maybe they made a decision on this property without the full set of information in front of them. So then part of our mandate is to make sure that they do have that information. But going forward, we could have 100 schools that might come up for development or repurchase, or we only look at the buildings just because it might be the same size or shape or date doesn't necessarily mean that it has the historical, cultural aspect to it. So we look at it individually. So it's not I would never say that this committee is doing a blanket kind of throwing it over every single school or every single building. I think we're fairly meticulous in looking and considering each building on its own. Wilson?
Yeah, I concur with Kathy. I think that every unit, every instance needs to be addressed, looked at, evaluated. To say that this is a blanket statement for all the buildings is incorrect. But I think we should do it for this one, and we should do it for the next one and the next one, because they all have significant impact on the neighborhoods as well. So that's funny.
Yeah, and again, through the chair, I guess my point, I could argue this both ways. I could almost say that perhaps, we shouldn't get it at this point where there's a demolition permit involved, right? It should be earlier in the process, like it should be almost a kind of a baked-in part that we should, if a school is going to be, looked at for other means, let alone demolition, that a cultural heritage analysis should be part of the equation. And I know the school board's involved here too, so there's a third party, right? But if maybe part of it is we should communicate that loudly, right? So as I said, I can argue this both ways, right?
Kathy, is it okay if Chelsea just responds to
course.
this?
To the chair, I think we can all agree it's better to be proactive. And we would all love to be in that position. Certainly I would. That would make my job a lot easier. But one of the things that our inventory research group is working on, I think, will be a huge benefit to us, is they're going to do an inventory of all the schools across Hamilton. So I think that'll be our opportunity to do that review and identify schools that we think do have cultural heritage value and flag them for any cultural heritage impact assessments that we think should be required prior to alterations or demolition. So I think that will help us in terms of being more proactive, so we're not getting to the stage where we're demolitions and
Yeah, I was just through the chair, that was exactly my point. So I was wiggling a bit here, but casting my eye down to 11.5 and looking at the added general information item, you can see that there is a very cogent looking plan in place to add places of education to the documentation that on which the city bases its decisions and its movement forward. And Kathy Wakeman's preliminary assessment here looks brilliant. So we have a worksheet, we have criteria, and based on these grounds, as Chelsea's already said, their job should be made a lot easier, and it won't be this question of responding reactively to emergency situations. We'll have a well-grounded set of criteria, and as buildings come up for changing in their occupancy status, we'll have much more solid grounds moving forward.
All right, so we have before us recommendation. Mary, do you want me to just read? Just show one more time.
We want to put in some we'll have a preamble, some whereases. Recognize that a cultural heritage impact assessment will be completed on Parkside Secondary School, 31 Parkside Avenue, in light of information from staff regarding the cultural heritage attributes, and that significant parts of the building identified in the cultural heritage impact assessment be used and preserved in future development.
And be active registered.
And
So we have our motion and our seconder. So all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. All right. Mistaken, our next item is item 11.1. So under general information and other business, 11.1 is an update from the Cultural Heritage Planner respecting the designation of planning and economic development. So you have before us an extra package, here called Heritage Designation. Chelsea, you're up again.
Through the chair, the committee had previously asked for an update on how our work designation work program is going on. So here's the latest update. So if you want, I can go through some of these in more detail, and if you have any questions along the way, then just butt in. So the first one, 167 Book Road in Ancaster, known as the Book House. So this has been on our work program for a while now. It's located in Ancaster. It's significantly set back from the road. It's in fairly rough condition. So I mean, as it last stands, staff did a site visit back in 2014 and had discussions with the property owner. Now, most recently, I've been made aware that the property owner has retained their own heritage consultants to do a heritage impact assessment to look at alternatives to perhaps the demolition. I know that they have expressed that is their intent. They're concerned in terms of the safety aspect. But that's where that stands right now. So we haven't moved forward, recognizing that they're working with their own heritage consultants and have agreed to keep us in the loop about that. So next one, 71 Claremont Drive, known as the Margate House. So staff have retained this year consultants to do both a heritage assessment and a building condition assessment as well. So we received permission from the property owner to enter in and do that full building condition assessment, which I think will inform the recommendation that comes out of this committee and the recommendation that goes forward to the planning committee about whether or not to designate.
Through the chair, if I could, Chelsea, is there a timeline on that? assessment, the house is in desperate condition?
I anticipate we'll probably have a draft, at least, that will go forward to our inventory and research group, probably either late summer or early fall.
Thank you.
So the next properties, known collectively as the core buildings, 18 to 22, and, it's 24 and 28 King Street East. As you're probably aware, the council passed notice of intention designating in December of 2013, and the property owner appealed it to the Conservation Review Board. Most recently, we had a pre-hearing conference on July 15th, and as you're probably also aware, they've submitted heritage permit applications, and so those were reviewed by the Heritage Permit Committee earlier this week. There were 2 heritage permit applications, one for the demolition of 24 and 28 King Street East, and one for the restoration of facade and addition on top to 18 to 22 King Street East. The Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee considered both applications and recommended denial of both applications. A staff report will be coming forward to this committee on September 22nd. And that's where that was. The next 77 Gage Avenue North, the former King George School. So notice of intent to designate was issued, and luckily there were no appeals within that 30-day appeal period. So there is a bylaw that will go forward to the next council meeting on August 12th to pass the designation bylaw. 140 Locke Street South. As you're aware, there was a report that came forward to the planning committee, or to Heritage Committee today. But of course we've deferred that, so we'll consider that in August. 1395 to 1401. So there's a number of properties here from our work plan for this year and next year. So we're trying to be a little more proactive in terms of retaining a consultant. So down the list here, we've got 1395 to 1401 King Street East, all the way down to 14 to 12 John Street North, which is Treble Hall. So we've retained consultants for all these to do cultural heritage assessments. So they are working on it. So I anticipate having perhaps some of them completed before Christmas and to submit for review. But the intent was to try and group together some of these cultural heritage assessments, so that we're getting them done more so in chunks than those. So our priorities for 2017 are Gage Park, Gore Park, and then the Desjardins Canal. So you may recall that Gage Park and Gore Park were on our work program for this year, but recognizing that it takes a certain expertise to deal with kind of these parks that are more of a cultural heritage landscape and don't necessarily involve built form. So we are undertaking new roster assignments for 2017 to 2018. So we anticipate through that we'll look for a consultant that can specifically handle these cultural heritage landscapes. So that's the intent there. And then we've got other priorities for 2018, 2019. If there's any questions, I can go through them. I can kind of point out the highlights. You may recall 2251 Rima Road East, which is now in 2020. You may recall that this committee considered requesting the property owner last year to remove it from the work plan and from the register. Council decided not to remove it from the work plan or the register, but instead moved it from the priority from 2018 to 2020. So that's why it's in our 2020 list. We flip to the back to demonstrate some of the items that are on hold and some of the other considerations. So 104 King Street, West in Dundas, former Dundas Post Office, has been tabled for some continued discussions with the owner. So staff will have to follow up on that.
and then the rail canal, 82 to 112 King Street East. So we're waiting for that development, those building permits to be followed through before we actually issue a notice of intention to designate, because the notice of intention to designate would void any of the building permits. Other work plan considerations, 21 Stone Church Road. Well, we had that come forward to us today, so let's hopefully we take that off our to-do list, so that's great. We also have the book cemetery that Ellis had mentioned previously. So council had directed staff to designate the property in 2010, but at the time there, I have it noted here that it was a confirmation of legal description, but it was actually confirmation of the property owner. Our cemetery staff is conducting a review of all our pioneer cemeteries, determine and confirm ownership. So they're moving forward with that, and so once we confirm ownership, we can move forward and actually issue the notice of intention to designate. And then some other considerations, 206 and 210 King Street East in Hamilton, the former Bremner's Grocery and Liquor Store. So there was a recommendation that went forward in 2014 to planning committee recommending the property be added to the register and the work plan, but it was tabled at the council meeting to allow for further discussions between the property owner before staff report back. So that's still an item for staff to follow up with and have those discussions with the property owner. And then 1099 King Street East, Jimmy and Thompson Memorial Pool. When it was recommended to council to put it on our work plan in 2013, the intent was that we would work with public works staff to identify a date in terms of prioritization, whether we want to move forward with doing the cultural heritage assessment. So we still need to ascertain that date, but just as an update, you may be aware of it. We do have council direction from April of last year to retain the building and make some accessibility improvements that respect heritage attributes. And so they've been going through their site plan, and staff has been working with them to identify the cultural heritage attributes and ensure that they're retained through that process. And then lastly, we have Mount Mary, also known as Wednesday, 437 Wilson Street East in Ancaster. So that has been on hold since 2012, and it was referred back at the local council's request to have a meeting with the owner and staff, and so we're happy to do so, just waiting on the council to schedule a meeting. Any questions or clarification that can provide any items? Oh, I should also mention, looking at Councilor Johnson, let's trigger this. We did add One South Theater to our work program for 2018.
Thank you.
Here.
Just through the chair, just a general question, Chelsea, and this is most impressive, and thank you very much for this update. I find it very useful. But there's always a but, right? I seem to recall at previous meetings there has been mentioned, particularly during the summer, that you might be getting student assistance, and that we're going to, the prospect was held out that we might be making a more rapid dent in some of this backlog. I see that you have made a dent, and I certainly see that this hiring of consultants to get moving on the whole of the list of page 2 is a really promising initiative. But any chance of increased staffing? How does the backlog look in terms of manageability?
Through the chair, there's no update on that yet, but through our process review, through our heritage process and our heritage designation process, staff are working through the final details of preparing a report. They'll have several recommendations to try and deal with, among other things, this backlog. So that may be one of the things that we look at in terms of recommendations, either students or additional staff or additional funding, or what can we do essentially to move faster. But there's no final word in terms of what we'll do in terms of we'll hire, etc.
Just through the chair, quick follow-up then. When we expect this report, if changes are impinging on that, yeah.
I think I'll try and provide an update through the chair. So as you can see, Chelsea's generally here on her own. So we're still looking at recruiting and filling the position at the other cultural heritage position that we have vacant. So until that position is filled, Chelsea really, her focus is on the day-to-day permits and, there's development review and all the many things that she has to do with her limited time. So once we have an additional cultural heritage planner on staff, then the intent is that we'll get back to looking at that process when we have a little bit more hands available.
Not to drag this out too long since it is a backlog already, but I noticed in your 2020 assessment, the Cannon Knitting Mill is coming up. And that is near and dear to me as it's my neighbor. But I know that it's just recently sold. And I recently went on a tour with the new owner. He had a public tour of the building, Harry Stinson. And he talked about quite a bit of demolition that may be in his intentions and quite a bit before 2020. Is that a consideration for the timeline of these sort of things?
So through the chair, it'd be most likely that I'll have to go through some sort of development application in what he wants to do. I don't know off the top of my head what he wants to do, but I'll probably have to go through a formal consultation first, at which point we'll identify that this is on our work program and most likely cultural impact assessment. So there may be potential to bring our recommendation forward through that development process and through that cultural impact assessment, just like we did for 493 Dundas Street in Watertown. So there may be an opportunity.
There'll be some watching.
Yeah, absolutely. There'll be an opportunity to monitor and identify what the cultural heritage attributes are, and then ensure that they're preserved through that process.
Comments or questions? If not, may I have a motion to receive this information? David, seconded by Chuck, all in favor? Carried. Our next item is item 11.2, which is our municipal year-end report. The committee focused on what's the update today. Item 11.3 is our 2015 Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee Heritage Recognition Awards. So I guess maybe I'll just make a comment. Thank you to everyone that attended. It was great to see everyone there. Thank you to all those that helped. We had both taking pictures and captains are helping. We had lots of people helping with the event. A lot of happy property owners. We've got some very good comments back. Everyone was very excited to get their awards. The Diocese of Hamilton has posted on their homepage that they received an award from the city. Who else have we heard from? I said, well, if you had a chance to speak with the property owner.
There was an argument of planning review on the designation for that on Green Street.
The developer, Corbin, very excited. They were 3-time winners this year. So they are making a point of making sure that they're awarded in each one of their buildings. And they're looking forward to the next property that they So again, thank you all for that award, and I guess we can look forward to next year. If anyone has any ideas, we need to start to collect that information now.
And if the city finishes the Memorial Hall building and we'll put bids in for awards there next year.
We couldn't this year. They held us off for a year. So, and actually we got a lot of interest in having it at the Dundas Museum. People hadn't been there. That was their first time as our awards, and I know the museum got a lot of great feedback today. People staying for tours, and so it gave them a lot of good promotion for their space. May I have a motion to receive that update? Mark, seconded by Wilf, all in favor? Carried. We now move on to 11.4, which is our buildings and landscapes. So under item A is our endangered buildings, the landscape's red. So we'll just quickly go through this list. The Tivoli,
Nothing.
Bookhouse,
Nothing,
Andrew Swaps,
nothing.
Century Manor. I need
Well,
That's it.
I've been walking there with my grandson the last few days, back and forth. He's decided it needs to be converted into a fire station, but then he wants everything converted into a fire station. He's 5, what can I say? On a realistic basis, there has been some vandalism. There had been some vandalism, I think, while I was away in Europe, and it has been quite surgically repaired. All of the, I guess it's plywood that is kind of blocking all of the windows. It's all been painted black, and I'm not sure. It makes it look at first glance a little less vulnerable because you don't instantly see that it's boarded up, but it also looks a little bit like sort of staring eyes or vacant teeth. It's not exactly aesthetically pleasing, but all of it is functional. And the poor building is in sad shape, but in terms of its security at the moment, it's okay.
Beach Canal Lighthouse, Councilor Kirk. 18 to 28 King Street.
So Chelsea had mentioned there was the permit review committee on Tuesday that we're reviewing 2 permits, one for 18 to 22 and the other one for 24 to 28. One for demolition and one for the restoration. And the permit review subcommittee denied both the permit applications. And that's pretty much it on that.
1 St. James.
Through the chair, I don't have any update on those.
All Saints Church.
Sadly, I think we might as well remove All Saints from the list here. The boards are up and the machines are there. I think it's not long on it being torn down, so we might as well remove it from the list.
So do we have a seconder for Councilor Johnson? All in favor? Any opposed? No. 4351 King Street East. Okay. Under buildings and landscapes of interest, yellow, we have Delta High School. James Street Baptist, there's nothing. Centenary Church.
Thank you.
Pearson Hall, I think we talked about that today. Charlton Hall, Councilor Pearson's not here. St. Giles United. 33 Bowen.
No.
2251 Ronald.
So there's no changes to the property? I don't think, I assume they're still, the owner's still trying to sell it as per his last submission, but there's no physical changes that I can see.
Trouble Hall.
The only thing is, Chelsea and I worked together to find information to contact the owner. What she did with that information, I don't know. That's not nefarious.
Is somebody getting harassing phone calls?
No. Through the chair, we did retain consultants to do the culture assessment. So I want to contact the property owners to get in touch with them about that. That's right.
That's very good. Heritage Properties Green, the Rail Knot.
It looks like the building is flying along from my empirical observations on the street.
Thomas Building, Lawrence not here today. Jardin Canal. St. Mark's, there's update. Auckland.
Stuccoing has been finished on the far right wing as you look at the front of the building, and looks super. There was a film crew there the other day, so I of course made my presence known and wandered in, and they had one room set up with lamps, furniture, and a big bed. Currently filming a ghost story. They wouldn't give me any more details, but it looked fantastic. I asked them if they could please leave the furniture when they go. They didn't seem keen on doing that, but the outside is looking really splendid. The inside, the more traffic we get in and out from film crews, particularly in the hallway, there's crumbling plaster and some damage. So we we desperately need a sugar mummy to give us money to fix up that inside ASAP. But when it's dressed up, it can look pretty good.
Westdale Theatre, Councillor Johnson?
Nothing, other than recent good news that the wheels are turning.
The federal building, Ron's not here. Although I think we can say that the reliefs have been completed, the restoration on the front. Did staff have to do a review, Chelsea? I'll let you.
Maybe while she's showing, I just noticed that the restoration of the panels, but you see that they seem to have some staining on them.
Oh,
I think it's new staining from.
oh, new staining.
It seems that there are those brass brackets above it, and now I didn't see the in-between finish, and so I don't know if the staining was still there or this was new staining that was on there. I'm just wondering that those brass brackets should have something to do with it because they are going to continue to mark the front of the building.
Through Chair, I'll have to take a look at that. I haven't taken a look lately. But they did get approval to move forward with essentially cleaning the freezes. It was a very minimally invasive procedure that they proposed. And they had someone that had worked with the original designer come out and actually do the restoration work. So they did get approval to do that. And it was very minimal work. And just to really clean them all up and prevent any further deterioration. Very non-invasive type work. We're still waiting, however, on proposed restoration methods for the doors themselves. So this is just for the freezes.
As I say, I didn't see the
In between.
the finished job. In between, so I'm not sure if there was actually some staining still on from the original.
G. Thompson Pool?
Just from what happened here, it looks like it's being looked into.
Aubrey Zimmerman House?
The family's living in it, and they just slowed down a bit on the restoration project. Maybe some financial balance, suspect, but they're keeping it in good shape and enjoying living homes.
And then last on Heritage Properties block, we have the Arthur Gate House.
Well, good news today that the owners agreed to have the cultural heritage impact assessment, and I'm sure there's absolutely no doubt as to its cultural heritage value. The building condition report is going to be the real clincher here, because it's essentially a brick structure covered with stucco. The stucco is crumbling, the brick itself has been compromised, the roof is no longer viable, the roof has been for the last couple of years in a state of complete disintegration. The wonderful gingerbread trim around the windows is deteriorating and is in some places completely missing. I'm holding my breath for these assessments, but it's clearly going to need a great deal of work. Where the money is going to come from will be the issue.
Not really, that's one more quick question, and my memory is fading as I go through here, but for 18 West Avenue South, I had asked last time that it be added to our list, and that I would be keeping an eye on it.
At the last meeting, was it?
Good memory.
Yeah, thank you. I'll add it. My
That's because
apologies.
I've been watching in between.
So tell us all about it.
Yeah. Well, I know from through the staff that there actually has been a demolition permit. Was it issued or asked for on that property?
Demolition permit has been issued for that property. And so, as you recall, this committee made a recommendation to planning committee that they consider designating the property based on the results of that Locke Street South submitted. So planning committee did consider that recommendation, but ultimately decided not to designate the property, which unfortunately doesn't provide any protection against demolition.
Meaning it will be demolished. Well, don't bother.
we'll keep it on the list. It'll be on the next one, but so we'll keep watching it. May I have a motion to receive the information as discussed? Mark, seconded by David, all in favor? Carried. Finally, we move on to our item 11.5, which is our City Hamilton Inventory Places of Education, presented by the Inventory and Research Working Group. I think I am the only person here from that working group. So just to give you a little bit of background, the Inventory and Research Working Group typically would be responsible for the various inventories that we have. So on record right now, we have an inventory of places of worship. I think we were one of the first municipalities in Ontario that actually produced one. And then we have an inventory of cemeteries. So those are documents that are available to ourselves, to staff, to the public, just as a gathering of information for research purposes. So the working group, they have a lot of other things that they need to be working on right now, but we wanted to have a project that we can move forward with as our next piece in that puzzle of inventories. So their next one that they looked at, and it was taken on the importance of what was the urgency, what is that record of information that we need to reference most readily, and places of education, as our discussions that we had today, places of education was the one that came up. So the intent is for the working group, they've put together this plan that you have before you, laying out what the objective is, so to document and make available for research in hard copy, internet, and digital, a comprehensive source of information about the State of Hamilton's rich inventory of heritage assets, places of education, and to provide a comprehensive reference to HHC, staff, and City Council for preliminary assessments. So again, it's looking at the various boards, public, Catholic, all of the other schools, looking at various groups, and so it's really trying to get a comprehensive picture of our heritage properties that are related to places of education. So that is before you, just as information. This is something that the working group is going to start figuring out their full complete work. Volunteers. Right now there's 5 members on the committee. Definitely not enough to complete all of the research, so they'll have to look at and see are there members of the Municipal Heritage Committee that would like to help, are there volunteers from other groups that we can get involved, and how they break up the work. Is it being done by various boards, groups working with Catholic Board, Public Board. We also, they will probably be looking at our relationship with the Education Archives. They have a wealth of information already on the public, so we have to put those feelers out there. They had volunteered in the past to help with that data gathering. So next steps for them is to provide this information for our information purposes and then proceed with data collection. One of the very last couple of pages, the Appendix A, you'll notice there's an evaluation process. So the group worked very diligently and actually sort of did a test property if they were to go out and do a cursory review of the property. What is the information? Also looking at maintaining our standards from the places of worship book as well as the cemeteries. What information needs to be there? The other thing too the group is looking at, it's not necessarily to reshape how these inventories have been done in the past, but how do we make them better? So making sure that it's an accessible document, that it's readable, that it's, right now the references are maybe just a small thumbnail image. Maybe we need to have a little bit more photographic image. And then just, so this here really is the worksheet that the volunteers are going to be working from. So everybody's working off the same checklist, and we'll have the same data that's going to go through. So that's just a little update from that working group. They wanted to bring it here so that the Municipal Heritage Committee could see that. That's something that they're going to start and get the data gathered now. And then if there's anyone that would like to volunteer with the project, you are more than welcome to join in that. Is there any questions or discussion?
Madam Chair, just to say it's a fantastic initiative. It's really about time, and it dovetails very nicely with our earlier discussion about outside, that it's an essential piece of our heritage, and it's so useful to have those other inventories searchable and available online. And I'm assuming this will be too, once it's done, and we could maybe have something, as you say, something slightly better in terms of the visuals, have the thumbnails clickable so that we could get enhanced visuals, but fantastic initiative, so congratulations to the team.
Any other comments or questions? If not, maybe we have a motion to receive this information. Wolf, seconded by Kathleen, all in favor? Carried. Are there any other items? If not, may I have a motion to adjourn? David, Kathy, all in favor? Carried.